Hello students. Today we are going to discuss about exception handling in PLSQL under the subject Database Management System. Before starting, let us see what is an exception. An exception is an error condition during a program execution. PLSQL supports programmers to catch such conditions using exception block in the program, and an appropriate action is taken against the error condition. There are two types of exceptions: system-defined exceptions and user-defined exceptions. First, let us see about system-defined exceptions. Let us see the syntax of it. So we have the declare block. After that, we have the begin block. Next, we have the exception block. Now, under the exception block, the handling statements will go. So when exception 1, then you put the exception 1 handling statements. Here when and then are keywords, and exception 1 is the type of exception which you are catching. And exception handling statements are the statements which will run if this exception 1 occurs. At the end of all the exceptions, try to keep the last option as when others, so that if none of the exceptions match here, it will come to others, which is a default exception, and then it will execute the exception handling statements. Let us see an example. Now, in this particular example, we have CID customers dot ID percent type colon equal to 8. What is the meaning of this statement? We have taken a variable CID which has the same data type as the ID column under customers table, and it is initialized to 8. Next, we have taken two more variables, C underscore name and C underscore ADDR. Now we are going or entering into the begin statement, where we wrote select name address into the two variables which we took here, that is C name, C address, from customers table where ID equal to CID. That means ID equal to 8. If you notice carefully, students, you will find that this statement, that is select name address, okay, from customers where ID equal to CID, this portion which I have marked with red, you have studied this in SQL also. What is new here? We are just storing this name and address into two new variables, that is C underscore name and C underscore address, so that we can print it accordingly. So in the next line, if you can see, we have just printed name colon, then this name which we have got from the table, address colon, which we are printing the address here. What is this operator? This is known as the concatenation operator, right? Which is combining this particular name colon with the value of the variable C name. What if this table, that is the customers table, don't have a row where ID equal to 8? What will happen in that case? So there won't be any data found. Now we have kept the exception block where we wrote when no data found. This no data found here is a default exception. Sorry, yeah, it's an inbuilt exception. Okay, so when no data found is an inbuilt exception. Okay, then dbms underscore output dot put line no such customer. Then we wrote when others, that means if no data found is not matching, this exception is not matching, it will come to the default exception, that is others. And then output dot put line error. Now, other than no data found, are there any other inbuilt exceptions also? Yes, there are. I have made a list here. No data found, too many rows, zero divide, invalid cursor, okay, do well on index. All these things, whatever I wrote here, are some of the mostly used exceptions. Other than this also you have more, you can go through that. Now we are coming to user defined exception, where we raise an exception. So exceptions are raised by the database server automatically when there is any internal database error, but the exceptions can be raised explicitly also by the programmer by using this command raise. This, if you can see, this is the general syntax where we wrote declare exception name exception begin. Okay. If you notice carefully, this particular exception name can be anything, okay, of your choice. Exception is the keyword here, right? So this exception name, this particular thing which I have marked with red, this is your user defined exception. Then you are writing if some condition, if it is true, then you raise the exception. And then you write the exception block. It will be clearer if we are seeing it in an example. Kindly notice the example here. We have the declare block here, right? Under the declare block, we wrote CID. That is the, what is this CID? That is a variable, right? Again, same thing. What is the data type? The data type of CID is the same as the data type of ID under the customer table. And why did we write ampersand CC underscore ID? Because we wanted to take this value from the user. If you are facing a difficulty here, you can just write, you can just hard code it with any value, suppose 5, okay? And then you can execute it at first, then you can go about with this ampersand one. Then we have taken two more variables, CNAME and CAddress. What is the user defined exception here? It is EX underscore invalid in underscore ID. This is the name of your user defined exception. And we have used the keyword exception here. Now we enter the begin block. Under the begin block, we see that if CID less than equal to 0, then raise X invalid ID. So if a user enters some CCID here, which is suppose 0 or less than that, then you are going to raise this exception. This raise here is a keyword. Okay. As soon as you raise the exception, what will happen? It will go and search for the exception block. And if this condition is false, then it will directly go to the else part and execute this part. The else part, whatever I wrote, is similar to the previous problem, so I am not going into the depth of that. First, let us go and see how this particular exception is handled. So what will happen if this if condition is true? And what will happen if X invalid ID exception is raised here? So when X invalid ID, then DBMS underscore output dot put line ID must be greater than 0. Okay. And when others, that is if this particular exception is not found and if some other problem is there, in that case, this others is a keyword, okay, for any other kind of exception, or is the default exception, we can say, right? If none of the, I just mentioned, right, that if none of the exceptions are matching here, it will come to the others part. So when others, then DBMS underscore output dot put line error. And we end it. So student, you have just now seen that we have studied two types of exceptions here. One is the default exception. One is the user defined exception, right? So for the default exception, just we will recap once. For the system defined exceptions, okay, what did we use? We have many exceptions, okay. I have used no data found here. Other than that also, I've just now shown to you, right? You have too many rows, you have zero divide, invalid cursor, etc. And what about the user defined exception? You can write your own exception, okay. You can give own name and then raise that under certain condition. You can raise that exception, and if it is raised, it will be called by, or it will be handled by the exception handling block. I hope that this concept is clear now. Thank you, students.